All right, welcome on the mic. I'm Jake Killeen. On today's episode, I'm very excited to welcome world-renowned golf coach Stephen Giuliano to the show. Stephen is the Director of Player Development at Impact Elite Golf Academy at the Mines Resort in Kuala Lumpur. He is also a Level 4 Senior Aim Point Instructor, only 4 in the world. Stephen has over 50,000 subscribers or followers on Instagram and has a huge stable throughout Asia where he travels over 4 or 5 countries per year to develop their games. I highly respect this man as a person and a coach, and I'm so thankful he's here with me today. I look forward to having a chat. Thanks for being with me, Stephen.
Good morning.
Good morning, yes.
Good morning from Asia.
Yeah, mate, I love your little studio behind you. You've made that look pretty cool over the course of our shutdown.
I have, yeah. I've got a couple more little adjustments I want to make to it. I've got these kind of shelved, mirrored things which I had. I kind of put. They were kind of already here, but I want to take one of them down. I want that one behind my head down. Where is that there? To create some more white space, and I want to hang a whiteboard on this other one. Where is that? Over there somewhere.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, just so I can really use it for for like good studio stuff and do tutorials, and yeah, it'll be like a proper studio. But it's actually a pretty small office space, but it just works enough to swing a golf club and do videos in.
Yeah, sure. Is that where you do all your online stuff as well?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'll do some stuff at the academy that are based out in Malaysia, but I'll probably do more of that for like short game, like if I've got to like demonstrate, shot variety around the green or bunker shots. But this actually works really well just for any full swing stuff. It's super easy, and yeah, I don't have to stress about like going to the academy and there's other coaches there, or there's freaking lawns, the grass is being cut, there's too much noise or all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's a very easy space to work in.
Yeah, cool. Well, you've got a huge name over in Asia. A lot of people listening from Australia might not understand what influence you got over there. I've been over there for a year or so, come back recently, but I definitely was understanding of how much you do over there in Asia and how many countries you travel to. So, what made you sort of leave Melbourne? Because you were down there for 10 years, I think, at Sanctuary Lakes, heading up the coaching there. So why the move from sunny Melbourne, mate, to Asia?
Well, first thing, it's not always sunny, as you know.
Might have been some of the influence, maybe.
Yeah. It was, I guess I got to a point in my like coaching where I figured I'd been very fortunate. Probably it's not a good word to use, but yeah, I'd worked with some better players over my time, including yourself as a trainee, including guys like Kieran, including Marty, including Steely, like these younger guys who are all really still good friends of mine. So yeah, I'd been able to kind of work with this kind of young group of players back then, which turned into a Stacey, Keating, which turned into some young tour players. I coached another boy from New Zealand who was coming through, and so that was really good experience. And I guess I was still pretty early on in my coaching there, but I enjoyed working with that better player. And I think, like anything, like what you put out there is what you get back. I was very I don't know if intense is the right word, but very kind of focused as a one-to-one kind of coach, and was very interested in like the kind of one-on-one dealings with a person, trying to figure out how to make them better. So going through that process, having, some success with those students, Stacey ultimately went on to play on the European tour, dabbled a little bit in the US. She had some wins. Kieran was interesting. Both those players got to #1 in Australia as amateurs almost right at the same time. So I think that kind of helped things along a little bit. And ultimately, I kept working with those players. Kieran moved on when he turned pro, and when he sort of started playing on the Asian tour. So I kind of got to a point where I'd finished up at Sanctuary Lakes, as you mentioned, and I'd started coaching at Albert Park. And then I sort of thought, well, is this pretty much what it's going to be like, going forward, my next 10, 20, 30 years? I was still a pretty young coach at the time, 10, 12 years, 34, 5, I guess. And I had dabbled a little bit in Asia already. When I say dabble, like teaching in Asia, I'd where I used to coach at Sanctuary Lakes, we had international programs pretty much all the time. So we'd have Korean students that would come over. We'd have students that come and train with us from Malaysia and Thailand, because we had a program that we ran through Victoria University. And so I guess had created some, relationships with different Asian demographic. And then, when things kind of finished up at Sanctuary Lakes, I was like, I was at one of those kind of crossroads, and I thought, do I want to keep working in Melbourne? I'm working with some better players. I'd done a couple of trips to Asia already, just small coaching trips. And I'd also had a number of friends over here who were saying, you've got to try it. There's good opportunities, rah, rah, rah. And ultimately, I did start coming over to actually do some business conferences in Asia almost at the same time I was coaching. I had a friend who's based in Japan. He said, come over and do these business conferences. They're golf business conferences. And that was kind of interesting. There was one in Malaysia I went to. There was one in Thailand, which I actually presented at as well. And I think just through kind of dipping my toe in the water, I did a trip to China. I did a trip to Singapore. I did a trip to Malaysia. I did a trip to Korea. And then a position, came up in Malaysia, or I had an academy that had approached me. And that was ultimately, the tipping point for me. At that point, I would say I was already ready. I'd looked enough in Asia. I'd spoke to enough people. I was already ready. I just hadn't figured out which country.
Yep.
And the decider for me is that in Malaysia, you don't need to speak a different language.
Yes.
In Singapore, you don't need to speak a different language. There was a couple of countries that were on my radar where I thought, I think I could live there, and it wouldn't be as daunting to me from a language barrier standpoint. So kind of roundabout way of telling you that I think I'd not had enough of Melbourne, but I was looking for something that was like the next challenge, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I wasn't having success in Melbourne. In fact, the year I left was the year that I'd won Victorian Teacher of the Year, which is, it's a nice accolade. So that was, a nice thing to be honored for, through some of the work I'd done with those players I mentioned and other students. But yeah, ultimately, I guess I was looking to see what I could do outside of Australia. And yeah, Malaysia happened to be the spot I landed in.
And it sounds like you're not regretting the move. Very busy over there, and you're still enjoying it over in Asia.
Yeah. So one of the things that I didn't anticipate is that I wouldn't really be in Malaysia that much. As you kind of mentioned, it turned out that I was able to kind of spread my wings throughout Southeast Asia and I guess Greater Asia, if you include Korea, Japan, India. But ultimately, I do a lot of business within ASEAN, so the Southeast Asian nations. And but it's been nice to be able to move around and work with some different students in different parts. But I'm definitely trying to condense things a little bit more now.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned earlier you were very successful with some elite amateurs and some elite players back in Australia. That was 10 years ago, was it now? How long ago was that?
Yeah. I guess it would be mid 2000s, mid to late 2000s.
Yeah, and yeah, Kieran and Stacey, you mentioned, had amazing amateur careers and turned pro and got off to a great start there. I find it interesting because you did so well with them, and I spoke to Kieran actually recently on the podcast. And he mentioned that he came and spoke to you or saw you a little bit when he made his return to golf only a few years ago. So your philosophy in golf, did that change in coaching? Obviously, you probably learned a lot more over the last 10 years. So take us through the first time you spoke and worked with Kieran to the recent time, and what changes did you sort of have in your coaching or your arsenal to help?
It's funny, the more recent stuff is more foggy to me than the early stuff. The early stuff, he was very young, obviously 18, maybe 19 at the most. And, I think back then it was very simple. What I remember working with him on, there was some, if you go into technique, there was some club face. I'm going to give a lot of credit back to the student right now. And I can remember this very vividly. Back when Kieran came, I probably had 5, I'd say young juniors, his age, I'd say 17 to 20, who I thought were all, had a lot of potential. Now, as a very young coach, very green, I couldn't tell who had game and who didn't have game. I was just, it was each one on their merits. And even now we don't know 100% what the future is. So, but I remember there was one other boy I thought, see, this kid's like, he's going to be good, right? And I remember going out and watched Kieran the first time playing, because he used to go to some amateur events, and it might have been a Vic Am or whatever. And he was doing well. He had some decent finishes, and he was playing this Vic Am, and he was down like 3 down through, with 9 holes to play. And he just came back and absolutely murdered this guy, right? Just a bulldog, birdie down the stretch, and just cleaned him up with 1 or 2 holes to play. And my first thought was, fuck, like, this kid's got balls, like he can play.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I realized, as a young coach, okay, there's a lot of different things that make up, that level of player that I hadn't really dealt with before, because, a lot of our instruction takes place on the lesson tee. And that really opened up my eyes, not so much to, what I've changed from here to there, but like what the player brings to the table. And, if I went through the stuff I worked on, it's quite boring, right? We fixed some club face conditions because it was extremely shut. He used to get a little more tilted in the backswing than what I liked. And we're always trying to get him to move a little bit back and away, just to kind of balance things out. And I don't think that's anything different than what I would look at now. I think I would do things a little, I think I'd get to the source of the issue a little faster now. I don't think I would be like tiptoeing around and doing it like, not that I do it faster now. I just think I'd come up with the analysis a lot more easily. My diagnosis would be a little bit sharper, but I'd still come up with the same, type of idea. In saying that, from a technical standpoint, yeah, it's definitely changed. I'm a lot more freer in how I like to see the hips move in the backswing. I would say, the way that I look at, say, a pivot would be more centered than what I would look at before. The dynamics of the downswing, I think I'm a little bit better at explaining that and understanding it, and just generally, how I see the swing shape. But I wouldn't necessarily say that what I would have told Kieran back then would be different to now. I think it'd be very similar. And what I worked on with him, going forward, which was maybe 5 years down the track, it's hard to, I think it's very, just speaking to you off air there, I think it's very tough to talk about that as far as how I was able to help him, because I think he was very different as well in his mindset. When I helped him back then, my feeling is he was, he used to take in information back then in small doses. And I think he took it back then in what he felt like he could use. Like, he didn't take the whole, jar of pills that was given to him, which I kind of respected. And I think also back then he was very fearless in how he played. That would be one thing I would say. What I did notice, like, full circle is, and I'm not going to say this is from me, because I can only, talk to you about how I helped him up to that point. I felt like he knew a lot more when he came to me, but not necessarily did that make him like play better.
Sure.
So I think the information that he had was a lot deeper, but I wouldn't necessarily say he was playing with the same amount of freedom.
Right.
So what I kind of looked at there was trying to, like anything, I'd look at what his ball flight was doing, look at his shot pattern, and trying to get him to move in a way that would, tighten that up or improve it. Now, his view might be a little bit different, because, everything is, is through your own lens, but at least that's the way I sort of, the way I kind of seen it. And I did feel like his zest or passion for the game was not at the same level as what I remember at, 19, 20, 21, when he played with Tiger, at that big open that time, which was pretty cool. It was just very different. Yeah.
Yeah, he touched on that when we spoke. He touched on the fun of the game and the love for the game.
Yeah.
He loved the competition. So if there was someone in front of him, like you mentioned, with the match play and his amateur career, a lot of the amateurs play a lot of match play. So if he had someone in front of him, he was like, I'm gonna kill you today. I'm gonna beat you today. And it brought out the best of him. But for him to practice by himself for a lot of hours and play tour golf, which is a very lonesome sport. And he even mentioned when you're playing a golf tournament, there's 150 guys around you, but there's no, you're just swimming in a fishbowl. That's what I think he mentioned. So I don't think the love for the game, and I don't want to speak for him. These are sort of his words though. It was more like, well, the love for the game, I don't think he had it like internally. Yeah. And so that makes it tough when you have to spend so many hours or, playing and practicing the game. If you're not in love with it, it's going to be hard to continue, and I spoke to him about it and said, well, you got to the point where you noticed that and you didn't keep going. You just said, you know what, that was not it for me. So I respected that decision too. But what career he had was pretty cool. I mean, he was one of the best. He's got one of the best amateur records on file.
Right.
And he won on the Asian Tour, second year out. So
absolutely, yeah.
Like he said, he could have been anything, but he doesn't regret what he's done and what he hasn't done. So.
I completely agree with what you said and what he said as far as what I felt through him. I did feel like when he came back to me, he was kind of searching a little bit, but I didn't feel that the fire was there. And I think it doesn't matter what information you tell someone, if you can't change someone's mindset to that extent if it's already set. If they're missing home, if they're struggling with travel, if they're missing home because they've got their partner or their family, and it's a real challenge for them, there's always going to be something that ultimately is going to restrict them to kind of go after it. And if that passion's died off, plus you've got other things pulling you away, I think that's a real struggle. The flip side of that was Stacey, who I work with, was just not with the same level of talent you would say as Kieran. A lot of things that you had to guide her with and help her with had to be kind of built. You had to kind of build her swing, you had to kind of build her mindset, you had to kind of the small wins that she had and the small successes were her fuel to get to that next level, whereas Kieran was already like, I'm going to freaking kill you today, like regardless, like it was already there. Just that kind of dogged mindset, which I spoke about this in a webinar we did a week or so ago for some of the Singapore. I think with some students, it's built in, like it's programmed. They have that internal like drive, and not so much drive as in, that they want to do well. It's like their mentality is they're going to beat you. And, whether they're at that level or not. And then you have some others who I'd say Stacey, whereas she had to have the victories and, shoot a couple under par to realize, oh, I can do this. It wasn't like I can do this beforehand. She had to kind of see the results. And that's, I don't know that any one mindset is better than the other, because at the end of the day, you still have to work to get to that level. And that's something that Stacey had a little bit over Kieran. She would do absolutely anything for the longest period of time until, the machine broke down and she couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, I got it. And Kieran was interesting. He described it as he would love a motivator. Like he wanted that footy coach to come in and, spray him so he can go off and take that aggression out. Right. So, as you said, that he's got that skill or that talent already. He just needed someone to sort of shake him and say, okay, off you go, go and get it. And that can't last, can it? I mean, if you got that, over 10, 20, 30 years of playing golf, it just won't last, will you?
No, you're absolutely right. It won't last. I'd say it's, there's going to be it's a bit of a ticking time bomb of when it, the fire gets, put out, versus if it comes from inside, it can burn, Bernard Langer, it can burn forever, when it comes from the inside. When it comes from something else, it's another person that you're trying to beat. Well, as soon as you beat them, then, if there's not something else there, it can die off. And I think that was kind of the case with Kieran. He definitely had some fuel there and he definitely loved to play. But ultimately, when he ticked some of the boxes, it was like, there's nothing else to tick anymore. And, we could all do better. And I think that's experience. I was going to say we can all do a better job of that, but I think it is the experience of the coach. Okay, when that student comes, like I've got a student like that now in Malaysia. He's the best amateur in Malaysia. He reminds me a lot of Kieran. Like he needs to be kicked, punched, pushed, told. It still is a concern because I think ultimately is that still not going to be enough because it's not, coming from the inside. But I wouldn't have known how to deal with that student if I wouldn't have had like a Kieran, for example, in the past. I would have just tiptoed around and said everything's okay. But now, when he's talking smack and he's not putting it in, I know that I can give him the uppercut and tell him, you got to lift, son. You've got to do this, this, and this. Otherwise, you're wasting it. Like, I'm not afraid to tell a student now, you're wasting your time doing this. And if you don't pick it up, you might as well, go and, work for dad's business or, study more and find a trade or whatever, because I think we both know now what it takes. Like, you can't mess around when you're trying to get on the PGA Tour. You can't mess around when you're trying to get onto the Asian Tour or the Japanese Tour. These guys aren't messing around. They're all in. And if you're only half in or, 3/4 in, you're going to get found out at some point.
And they all love it, don't they? I mean, most of these top 10 guys, most of them love it and they can't wait to get out there and produce their golf and practice their golf.
Absolutely. I would say, I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule, but yeah, they're on full tilt the whole time. I mean, Tiger, the amount of time he must still put in to get his body ready each week, to get himself back in shape from someone who couldn't walk. That's another level of, what's the word I'm going to use? I heard this used a little while ago. I was going to say desperation, but obsession. It's an obsession at that level. I think those guys are so obsessed. Bryson's so obsessed at the moment with what he's trying to do with his body and hit it long. And when you get to that level of obsession, you'll do anything, until something breaks down or something, causes you to stop.
Yeah, you mentioned Bryson. We should talk about him because I think he's put on 13 kilos. He's now, I think he's driving around 340 yards, 190 mile an hour ball speed. I mean, these are long drive sort of figures. And he's got a 5.5 degree driver going.
Right.
What's this?
It's
What's this?
110 kilos or something like that, right? From 92 or 3 or whatever it was. Yeah, that's insane.
Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, it's 110 kilos and he just looks like he's long driving every hole.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, this is the PGA Tour here we're talking about, not some sort of long drive contest, but that's what he seems like he wants to be doing.
Yeah. And what was he? He was 14. He was one back, right, on the tournament.
He was hitting most fairways, I think. So I think in the third round he missed a lot of putts, so it could have been anything for him. But
yeah. Well, I haven't looked at his stats closely enough, this tournament, but from what I've seen, at least from last year's stuff, it does seem like it's definitely not his long game that would hold him back to win some of these. It's definitely more on the green. So it sounds like if he gets that figured out with strokes gained off the tee, it could get pretty tough for the others with that length advantage.
I think he's a whole full shot. I think stroke gained most of that tournament. Yeah, which is quite fascinating. But when you've got a 5.5 degree driver, I'm not sure what you think of that, but that's going to cause you to hit more up on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I guess is the balance between speed and loft. So I'm not that versed in what the long drive lofts are, but I'm pretty sure that's under 8. I don't think they're using loft drivers that are more than 8 because of the speed element, and obviously they have to keep the spin down and the loft down somehow. So I think he's just matching up to what's optimized for him, and obviously he's a smart guy. He seems like he's the most detailed guy there as far as like knowing his numbers and all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure he's done the math and figured out that's the drive that optimizes his carry the most and potential roll.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm loving it. I mean, I love watching it. So I hope he continues to do it. It will be interesting to see what happens with it. But watch this space, I guess, with him. But that leads me on to, so your philosophy with staying centered in the hip extension and so forth with your players, is that come around with TrackMan data in terms of impact zones and sort of getting to an understanding of impact over the years? Has that sort of generated a little bit more of how you like to see a golf swing?
Not at all. No, I wouldn't say it's got anything to do with TrackMan. I mean, my idea of the pivot, staying centered, it's really just an evolution of having a better understanding of how the body moves. So, when you're how much younger are you than me?
I'm 35, mate.
Okay, we'll say
15
10
years.
Yeah.
10
So, when I was teaching, and you would have cut the same information, a lot of it was about trail leg flexion, keeping the trail leg flexed. The pivot, it could be centered, it could move a little bit off, whatever. But basically, it was more about keeping body parts restricted as a mechanism for creating speed and kind of maximum distance. So, which is fine. That's something that, I think we all taught at a certain level. A lot of my early recollection was from a lot of what the Jim McLean X Factor backswing move was teaching. And that's kind of what we went with. But I guess going forward, like learning more about how the body moves, that was really just understanding a turning component of the body. It was understanding a little bit of the lateral movement of the body, but there wasn't really the third element, which I've got a better understanding of now, which is the extension piece of the body. And as you know, in order to create maximum leverage, when you look at the long drivers, sometimes they're launching themselves up, not just lower body, but upper body and even neck. And they're creating massive leverage from, extending, flexing and extending back. Now, whether you see that in smaller amounts with the lower body, you see it in larger amounts with the upper body or the neck, it's definitely happening as a mechanism for creating more leverage, potential speed and force. So for me, it was understanding, okay, when someone extends in the backswing a lot, it moves the spine more central versus if they just turned in flexion, which would move it more across. So just understanding how these different pieces work. If you look at the work done by Andy Plummer and Mike Bennett over the years, they talk very clearly about how the body moves in 3 dimensions. So it's not really anything new, I would say. It's just something that I didn't have as good of an understanding, or really a clear understanding of, when I was coaching early on. I mean, I could certainly see if the body tipped left and extended this way. I could certainly see if it turned more and moved this way, but I wouldn't say I would be able to describe it or even teach it as well as what I can teach now, or at least explain and influence now with how my students move.
So the X factor compared to what you just explained, is that to get more power with more accuracy? Is that the reason behind it all?
I can't speak enough for exactly why in that pure sense, but I do know from what I watched, read, learned back in the day, the X factor in the backswing, as in keeping the trail leg flexed and turning the upper body against that, was to try and create as much separation between the lower and the upper body. In other words, if I keep my trail leg flexed at 40 and I turn my torso 100, that creates, a bigger separation. I think what we've learned over the years, that isn't as important as creating a stretch in the downswing.
Right.
So ultimately what we're trying to do in the downswing is create, as the mechanism again for creating separation and potential leverage. I guess you could say his name just kind of slipped me. Works with Sean Foley, Cameron Champ, creates a huge stretch in transition. Now, whether he lengthens his trail leg a little bit on the way back or he does it a lot, at the end of the day, he creates a huge stretch going back, which means as his upper body starts to turn, his lower body's still, staying somewhat closed off. And for him, he's able to create a huge stretch. I'm not saying that is the only way to do it, but that would be, I guess, the theory behind, let's say, an X factor stretch.
Right. And do you think it prevents injury as well, or you're not sure how deep that goes?
I think it's person to person, but what I do know is if you look at the knee joint, it's basically a flexion and extension joint, like the elbow. It's not, I'm not it's not meant to twist or turn against something, or at least if it does, that can cause stress on the joint. So if I keep my knee facing you and I try and create as much like internal rotation as possible, and I can only get, let's say, 20 degrees, the only way I can get any more is to either torque at the knee, which can create stress because I might not be able to get as much through my thorax. So does it create stress on the knee? Potentially, yes. And I think it really depends on person to person. If you looked at Jason Day, could you argue that's created stress on his knee? I don't know the main reason for his injuries over the years, but I wouldn't use that as a long-term model for my students, at least. You know, if they're trying to get more torque through the hip, I'd release the hip joint. If they're unable to get it through, let's say, the internal rotation of the hip, they may need to actually release the knee more, which releases the hip more, and obviously allows them to get more range in that sense.
So in progression from the X sort of factor to what you're doing now, what are you seeing the most benefit out of your students in ball striking? What are you seeing? Higher ball flights, better striking, less curvature, freer movements?
Yeah, I would definitely say with more freedom of movement, they can create generally more range or length in the backswing. And it's not that all backswings have to be longer to hit it further. And also I would say on the flip side, if you talk about the forward movement, you know, being able to turn better in the backswing, you know, have some amount of forward movement, create more pressure going down into the ground, also creates more of a kind of upward extended movement on the through swing. So I think there's both ends that we're looking at there. It's not just the backswing. That potentially just helps them to move more freely and potentially create more speed. And I wouldn't say I'm necessarily just teaching my students to hit it as far as possible. I'd say it's definitely a blend of accuracy. You definitely can't play on the Asian tour, or certainly a major tour, if your club head speed's under 110, 112 would be considered quite slow these days. So yeah, being able to move the club up around the 115 for an elite male is pretty important, especially if they want to move beyond, you know, let's say a tour in Asia or something like that. Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about your online involvement too. I mean, you've got over 50,000 Instagram followers, which I think's amazing. So did you feel like that was a bit of a timing plus your work within Instagram that created that? How did you sort of generate that many followers through Instagram?
So firstly, with regards to timing, I thought I was late. When I started using it, it was probably two and a half years ago, I think, maybe something like that. I thought, oh, all these other guys are killing it.
Was that all 2.5 years ago? Is that all it was?
Yeah, it was like I did a coaching summit a few years back. Let me tell you, let me just check that actually. I'll try and find the exact date. So it was actually 2016 in February. So we're talking.
Wow.
It's actually 4 years, isn't it? Yeah, time flies. So I remember attending that conference, that summit. And when I left that, I was like, okay, I need to get better at my social media. So that was actually 4 years ago to date. But back then, and I'll just throw off three names that I can remember. And there was Andreas Carli, who's a good friend of mine. There was George Gankus, and there was a guy named Jeff Ritter. Those are just three that came to mind, I'm sure. And I remember those guys had something like 5, 6, 8,000 followers, something like that. Could have even been a bit less. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty big. Yeah. And I just started, you know, I'd used it. I had a couple of pictures of, you know, me goofing off and maybe one golf picture. I had no idea. And I just thought, well, obviously, you know, these guys are using it, and no one was really looking at Instagram that much from a golf instruction standpoint at the time. And I just thought, okay, from this day on, I'm just going to produce, I think I said 4 pieces of content a day for Instagram. Might have been 2. I think back then it was 3 or 4. And that's really all I started doing. And my main thought process is just to start to document what I'm doing. from day to day, and I was coaching a lot back then, working with students. I didn't really have an idea of exactly how I was going to use it, except that I'll just start to put out. I'd also done a whole bunch of magazine articles for different magazines at the time, because back then, we were doing that sort of stuff. We were doing magazine articles.
That's right.
It just sounds crazy.
Written media is dying in the ass.
Written media, yeah, I was doing it. So I was doing different written media for electronic magazines. I think it was Golf Magazine Asia, and there was a couple of others in Malaysia. And so I just took all the cool pictures and I'd started posting those. I did some putting ones and chipping ones, and that was kind of how I started it. And it evolved a little bit into what I like to use it for now, which is documenting students' journeys, before and afters, some tutorials that that I produce for students, some live stuff during lessons that I'll produce, some occasional quotes. And look, instructors now are using it in all different ways. Some are just purely as education, some are just purely documenting their lessons. Some are just purely swings, some are just purely short games. But yeah, my main idea is just to start to get my information out there. And I think because even though I felt I was late, in reality there still wasn't a lot of instructors doing a lot of stuff. So obviously, if all the eyes and ears are on, let's say 10 guys, but I'm sure there was a lot more than 10, versus now we could probably say there's 1,000 good pages, you could probably say there's more, then all of a sudden you don't quite grow as much. Now there's still guys out there growing, using different strategies and tactics. I've still tried to stick with what I do from day to day, and who I am and how I've evolved as an instructor. And sometimes that becomes a bit more swing centric. Sometimes it's some short game stuff. Sometimes it's some success my students have. I haven't tried to look at necessarily how can I grow anymore. I've just let that be organic. And, sometimes it does grow and sometimes it doesn't grow. But it's definitely been a good platform to get an understanding out there of what I do to the masses. And I think a lot of people respect that. They just respect like how you communicate, your style. If they looked at what I was doing 3 years ago, they would see a little bit of an evolution on different areas, maybe a bit of an evolution of how I communicate, how I teach certain areas of the game. But ultimately, hopefully it still gives a good understanding of the fact that I'm a coach, and, I like to be fairly well-rounded. I like to teach all areas. Obviously, of recent times, it's become a bit more of the remote space, but that'll shift and pivot a little bit as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, it's a perfect marketing tool, isn't it, for any golf coach who are running a business? I mean, not only that, but
totally.
You're getting an understanding of who you are as a person and a coach, and it's such a personal thing getting a golf coach. So when someone comes to you who already knows a bit about you and what you do, it makes it so much easier to kick off when you don't have to sort of try and sell yourself on the tee.
I completely agree. And the thing that I would also add to that is, I think it's important that you're putting yourself out there on any social media platform. When eventually that student wants to see you, maybe they sign up with you, maybe it's remote, or maybe it's in person, which obviously happens. They're really knowing what they're getting before they come to see you. They understand how you talk. They understand, what your level of English is like, as in, obviously I'm from Australia, so, I have a strong accent. Can they even understand me? There's a lot of things that we probably we kind of take for granted a little bit. But yeah, if I had a very difficult accent to understand, if it was very aggressive and fast, there's going to be a certain amount of students be like, I can't really understand Stephen, so I'm probably not going to go and see him for a lesson. So I think there's so many things, if you go really deep, that we probably don't think about as much. But yeah, how you come across, and even like the message you deliver, I think can go a long way into, what you get back as far as a student, be that a better player, be that a junior that's going to come to you because they see that you work with high level juniors like a James Jordan. There's a lot of things there that we have to be mindful of when we're putting information out there, over a long period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say your percentage of remote coaching is now compared to on the tee, on live on the tee? Not
Uh,
excluding the breakdown of the shutdown, exclude that. What do you think generally is
oh,
your breakdown?
but before COVID, do you
Yeah,
mean?
before COVID.
So before COVID, it was probably 20% remote coaching and
Mm,
80% face to face.
yeah. Do you
Yeah.
think that has a potential of growing, or do you think
I
you'll keep it like that?
yeah, do I think I'll go back to like 90-10?
Well,
Is that the
do you
question?
think from 80-20 you probably get closer to 50-50? Is that the way you want to take it, or do you think people are going to be more interested in remote learning after what they've gone
Yeah.
through, or do you think you like to keep it at 80-20, just purely based on the
Um,
fact that you can't see the student maybe go on the golf course
yeah.
with them, all that sort of thing?
I think it will shift back to 50-50, only because in my situation, a lot of my students that have taken up remote coaching are actually my students already.
Okay.
They're just based in different countries.
Mm,
Without a doubt, the percentage of my remote coaching has it has changed a lot because of the current situation, and I've been able to. I think just by the fact that students are unable to go to the golf course as much and maybe see their coach, and they've thought, oh, okay, well, I'll try this. It's becoming. I think like anything, 10 years ago, we wouldn't put a credit card into a computer because, of all fraudulent. And now we'll save our credit card in hundreds of websites and we
mm.
feel very safe, even though we've probably all had one issue over time or an
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
I think that public perception has changed because of, I think also because of the students are actually seeing that they can make change online, not just with their own games, but they're seeing other examples. Maybe they've looked at me, maybe they've looked at some other cool before and afters, and they've seen the timeline. So they think, well, I can do this at home. It's not as one-sided as in face to face. That's not just the only way. And I actually can get results if it's explained correctly. So I think that public perception has changed
Mm,
and students can give it a go. Now they can give it a go for 10 to 20 US dollars for a lesson if they want, for a
mm.
one-off. So that's a very low entry.
Yeah.
And if they have a good experience, they go, okay. And they can also do it for 400 US, if they want to do like a monthly program. And I think now that it's more widely accepted, we're getting more and more students. So just by that nature, I think we're also, everyone's seeing a little bit of an uptick. In saying that, I don't think it's going to go completely to one side. It
Mm,
has to shift back,
mm.
just because, at least from my experience, I'm going to go back to coaching face to face. So, and some of those students are going to be seeing me face to face, so there's no need for them to do that. But there's certainly some instructors that are really killing it in that space, making more than 100,000 a year just doing remote coaching. So it's certainly there, and
Mm.
that's not even including online courses, membership sites, which some coaches are obviously occupying that space and doing extremely well from there. Also, we're just talking about remote personal remote personal coaching, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, technology makes it a lot easier these days as well. But I mean, back in the day, if you said remote coaching, I'll be like, well, that's impossible almost. But people like
Mm,
yourself have made me aware that it is very possible. And an example of that is Mia Baker that you've started
mm,
working with. She's a
yeah,
cool example of what you can do remotely in a short period of time.
yeah,
I think for people listening, Mia, is it Mia, Miaellax on Instagram?
yeah,
And I think you've done
yeah,
the Mia project.
yeah.
And I would love to delve into that. You've been kind enough to sort of share some footage of her
Mm.
and your progression with her. So I might share the screen with you now. And we want to talk about how you sort of got her to the stage she's at now. I think you've only been with her 6 months from what I gather.
We started on basically the end of March. So I guess you could say 2.5 months.
Oh,
So
wow. Is
we're
that
about
all?
12 weeks or something like that in. Yeah.
And she was a pure
Much,
beginner when she sort of started seeing you online?
yeah. So she first picked up a club in November last year.
Right.
She went to the range a bunch of times. She had a couple of periodic lessons. And so when she first came to me in March, she'd had a club in her hand since November. So
Wow.
what you could say, that's 5 months or so. So I'd say pretty raw.
Yeah, I mean, she's looking on Instagram. She's hitting it mid. So you've done a fantastic job.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about how you did it.
Sure.
So let's.
Yeah. So you wanted me to dive into some of her early, or let's say one of her early.
Yes, please.
I
Yes,
guess.
please.
Right. This is not. Sorry, that's something. Trying to find. You keep asking me something else, and then I'll come back to
Yeah,
this.
that's right.
I'm just trying to
I
find
think
one of her.
I think it shows your ability in terms of simple communication. I mean, you've coached
Right.
for over 20 years. I think your ability to get to the point and stick with what she needs to do is evident in what you're doing. So, communication. What other sort of areas you think are really substantial in trying to get a student from sort of beginner level to on the golf course as quick as possible?
So that's pretty much the next phase, I'd say. Also for Mia, it's going from, just trying to get these videos up here. It's going from, she's doing a pretty decent job at home on the mat, and what we're now looking to do is transition her firstly onto grass, which she's doing. She's having some success there, and then the second one is to try and get her there to understand how to translate that onto different varying situations which the golf course presents. I mean, I probably like to go a little bit too slow. Should I share my screen now?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'll throw this original one up there. Okay, that one. So you could just see that one video of her, no doubt.
Yes.
So yeah, the progression for me is, I've tried to take things pretty slowly with her development, and really start off with like short shots, developing impact. I've always put attention on how her body's moving from day one. I've tried to give her drills around that, and then slowly I've started to encourage her to, okay, if you can. Unfortunately, this is not her house, so she can't just go and whack balls off the grass and chew it all up. So occasionally she'll sneak one off there, but I think she's got to be a little bit careful. Yeah. So. But I am trying to get her to progress to hitting shots off the grass, and just understand that that also takes some time, because when you hit off grass, you don't get the forgiveness of the mat. You start to respond a little bit to that, and you could also start to kind of sneak back. So I'm always trying to get very, very picky with her, going back to what she's doing with her basic motion. The basic motion of her hands and arms, the basic motion of her body. So I'm not sure exactly what you wanted me to go over with this, but this was her original swing.
Wow.
So there's a lot of stuff going on. This was a very interesting position to me as she came into impact. We typically call that as a throw or a cast, where the club is, fully straight way before impact. Clearly she still hit the ball. A lot of funky stuff going on here with her lower body and arms. So, when I looked at that originally, I actually looked at it and thought, well, she actually moves through the ball pretty well with her body. There's not that many beginners that can extend and keep their hips that far forward. So she's either has a little bit of innate sense of that, or she got told that, or whatever.
Yeah, she did such a good job of trying to, hold off that left wrist to try and get that impact, didn't she? She did see that bent elbow just to try and get impact. So there's a little bit of talent in that, isn't there?
There's something there, yeah. And I think it's fair to say, when we see a student for the first time, we as experience, getting more experience as coaches, we kind of pick up on some of those instincts. We go, okay, there's something there. And sometimes we see it and we're like, oh, there's, we have to do more work to kind of get them going. So yeah, it was definitely my thought. I'm like, okay, there's something there, but she obviously lacks, any decent structure to her backswing with her, I'd say her lower and upper body, how that moves. And she doesn't really create any width. Everything's just kind of folding and bending. And normally that just leads to a a bounce back effect where, it's just going to extend and straighten out early. So we see that kind of fold and extension of her trail arm. So a lot of what we did was just getting an understanding of how the arms work, getting an understanding of how her wrist would work, and slowly building on that with a different move with her lower body.
So did you do a plan up? Would you say, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to work on this, 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 and this over the next couple of months, and we're going to start with this? Is that the sort of communication, or you just give her one thing at a time and don't really indulge her in the process?
I don't get too much in the process as far as we're going to do this week and this next week, because I never really know if they can do it or not. And I also never really know if they can handle what I'm telling them, both from a communication standpoint and also just from a physical standpoint, as in, can they do it or not? So she might come back to me, like, for example, when I gave her her first 3 things to work on, which was her left hand, right hand position, and how to move her left arm and wrist, and how to move her right arm and wrist, and a pivot drill. There's kind of 3 things which I kind of split up. She performed them pretty well, I would say 80%. So straight away I was like, okay, this is a good start. Now I might have a very similar type of beginner and tell them the same thing, but I need to do 3, 4, 5 revisions before they're able to get to that 80% proficiency. So in that sense, it might take them 5 times as long as what it took Mia. Now I could also have a student that does it 100% the first time, but I would say pretty common would be 3 or 4 kind of back and forth before they actually really nail it. And then it's the repetition of the student that ultimately gets them to a pattern that starts to stabilize. That's what I've found kind of worked, pretty well for me and how I was seeing her progress. So maybe I can bring up one other video here, which was.
So you basically gave her that pivot drill, did you? You gave her that. Yeah. What sort of drill did you give her exactly for that after this footage?
I'm not sure. I've got it here. Do you want me to bring up like one of her swings and then maybe describe it with me?
Yeah, for sure.
In the Zoom call? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So when I click on this swing, can you see? Let me just bring this other next one up. I think. Okay, so that's her demonstrating.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
This was on May 4th. Yeah, so this was on May 4th, and we started on March 27th. So it's about a week later. And what I would say as well with Mia, and where I think remote coaching can help, especially at this kind of really developmental stage, she was literally sending me updates every day.
Right.
So in that case, she wasn't getting too far off what we were looking at doing. So this was on, I mentioned May 4th, and this was her demonstrating maybe an impact drill. She's got her weight forward. I was telling her to keep her right arm as straight as possible. And we're also doing some work. We were loading her arm and wrist on the downswing. So she was already able to do this.
Wow.
Which you could say looks a little bit funky or whatever, but for me, it's
pure.
It's not really about an end result yet. It's just trying to get some really major pieces in there, and have her perform them over and over again. This is definitely not not how the swing is going to look at the end. I wouldn't have her that far forward. I wouldn't have her that tilted. I'd have her head in a different position, but I do feel like she did a good job of loading the club, using her lower body in a different way, back and down. And obviously she got the concept of how her lead wrist and trail wrist need to be through the ball.
How's that impact difference? Oh my God.
Yeah, that was actually a good one. But this is kind of interesting. If I showed you her swing, let's say in week 8, which might have been, let's say into, so this was, I mentioned in around April the 4th. Oh, sorry, May 4th, excuse me. So March, April. Just let me check the date on that. just so I don't tell you guys anything. So this was actually May 4th. So this would have been a month and a bit afterwards. So March, April. So I was lying there. So this was about 5 weeks afterwards.
Yeah.
Probably 2 weeks after this, she'd sent me a swing where she'd missed the ball.
Right.
So it's not all, perfect, and it's obviously we didn't go through a clean process. As she started to get longer, sometimes she completely missed time shots. So in that sense, it's still a lot of back and forth and trying to improve those things. But one of the, you can see me back on the screen here now.
Yeah.
So one of the early things I got her to do, I'll just move this out the way. Because she had a pretty aggressive right foot position, bring that up just a little higher there.
So your early focus is more all about impact, right? Trying to get that impact position in what you would like to have seen.
Yeah. So from my memory, the first lesson I gave her, I just told her to move her right arm across her chest. Left arm across her chest. And when she stayed back, she had to flex her wrist forward. And I was quite specific in showing her how to move, how the wrists move in the swing. Mm-hmm. So I explained this and this and this and this, and I wanted her to demonstrate that. And then her first thing that she had to do was literally just swing her arm back and flex her wrist, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And with her right hand, she had to do the same. She had to just swing her right arm back straight. And again, I showed her that her right wrist can do this or this in the swing. Mm-hmm. And literally all I got her to do was swing her right arm back. And then as she swung it forward, she had to bend her wrist back.
Right.
And she did that. I very quickly got her to get a small club cut down. So she had to perform them without a club and then with a club. So literally she was just doing this on day one. And that was her homework. And then she'd do it with two hands.
Do you explain why to her, or is that depending on the student, maybe the concept of why that needs to happen?
Good question. She wanted to know why. One of the reasons why she struggled with a coach that she went to, let's say for a few lessons, the coach had said to her, in your backswing, throw a bucket of water over your shoulder. And she didn't like that because she didn't know why she should be doing that. Mm-hmm. And she didn't know how it would help her swing. So in her case, she did want to know exactly why. She said, why would I do that? And I had to explain that it's going to help her with her impact condition. I had to explain when she does this, the club would hit the ground too early. She'd either hit behind the ball or she'd top the ball. And even just something simple like that, I do feel resonated with her, and she was able then to go, okay, that makes sense. And then, mm-hmm. It helped her connect the dots in her head. I just started working with the most raw beginner I've probably ever worked with, plus online. She started playing golf in May.
Wow.
And she's from Finland. So I won't be posting anything on this unless she wants me to, but yeah, this is going to be a way big challenge because there's a bit of a language barrier. Mm-hmm. And I can see that she's not quite as coordinated. She's a bit more typical, through the ball. But I'm giving her a similar itinerary or process to work off. Mm-hmm. And that'll also be interesting for me. I think it'll be a little bit more challenging. But she does look like a fairly sporty lady, mm-hmm. and not maybe as coordinated as what we would like. So there's going to be some challenges there. And golf, as you know, to play other sports and then go into golf doesn't mean anything. Like it doesn't mean that you're going to be good at golf. So, but that was the first thing I told Mia from a arm and wrist standpoint. And the other thing that I did tell her to do, and I can't remember if I did this with a club across the chest or not, but I did also get her to, hopefully you can just see my feet there.
Yep.
I got her with her right foot turned out 45 degrees. And I got her 60-40 or even like 70-30. And basically just showed her how she had to change her knee flex in the backswing, which she wasn't doing before. She mm-hmm. was just really doing her arms this way. And So I told her how to change her knee flex and move her left shoulder somewhat down, because she was very, very kind of level and lifting. And then I also just explained to her from here how she would have her heel in front of her toe. So that's all she had to do. She just had to change her knee flex, make sure her heel was in front of her toe, and as she came up, she had to glide her foot up. And that's pretty much was her body motion drill to start with. And she had to send me that and demonstrate that to me, because she was, she was so much this way. So that was kind of the foundation. And her lower body doesn't look like that now. It's changed a little bit. But what I would say is my main goal was to get her to understand at least how to turn her hips and move her left shoulder more down. A lot of people struggle with that when they start. And at least to understand a little bit of footwork for her balance, because she was really all over the place in that sense.
Yeah, that's really cool. Very simple instruction. So the second part seemed to be, is that building a foundation for her speed and for her distance? That seems to be so the first one was more impact conditions. Second part, okay, now we've got to get you into this distance phase.
When you say second part, is in like what I'm doing with her now?
No, even that drill there where you're talking about left shoulder down, extending the leg different. Setting up for that length of swing that's now efficient enough to come down in that position.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did. I remember probably the first 2 weeks, we did so much work on her right arm and her levers, because she was just folding her right arm like so much in the backswing. And at the end of the day, when you have your right arm this folded, it's hard to create any width on the way down. I mean, the club's just going to bounce off, which is exactly what she was doing. So she wasn't really getting into a position where she could properly load the club coming down. So I don't mind in that sense to get students overextended. I don't mind getting them overstretched, because I can always create a little bit of fold, and I can always create a little bit of load on the way down once I've got it there. I find it, if they're here, they're in trouble anyway. They're just going to throw that thing out there. So that's something that we probably, and she was getting quite frustrated with that, because we had to talk a bit about, in order to move this around, she had to actually move her right shoulder around. So there was a bit of detail in there, which I don't really, it's tough when you're dealing with a beginner, because these are important things to start to get the swing to go longer, but we're trying to find a very simple way to try and explain it. And then obviously then they have to be able to perform it. And she's a very detailed person. She's like, I want my swing to be perfect. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if your head moves a little bit this way or this way. She's like, it's moving. I'm like, it's okay. She's like, it's moving down. I'm like, it's okay, because everything's just trying to, what I would term is get the main parts and pieces in there first. That's my main goal, to get some dynamics, get the main things working. And as she gets better, you can clean things up.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to find the videos. I literally remember for 2 weeks, she would go from a square face to the most closed face to the most open face to the closed face. And then at one point it was like here, and it was a little closed, which it's probably been that way for the last 2 weeks. And I'm just like, I'm not touching it. Like, I don't want to tell her anything, even if the ball goes there, because I'm a bit worried, like one small tweak, she would completely, she'll take the whole jar of medicine, and then we're back to square one again. So,
well, remote coaching, that's exactly right. And remote coaching has a little bit of a downfall in terms of you can't physically put them in that position. You can't, okay, well, you're struggling to understand that. Here's the feel, or, here's where I want you. So in that's difficult as well. But at the same time, if you're able to communicate it in a way and let them problem solve it, I think long term, if you look at the literature, that's going to be even a little bit better long term for them, for it to stay in the mind.
Exactly right. And this is where, and I know you've done some study on this as well, this is where my background in NLP, I'm a big proponent of that. I've studied a lot of NLP, has kind of really helped, not just with remote coaching, but normal coaching, because you could say, well, we're trying to find a certain position in the swing because we know it's going to help them on the way down. So what I've tried to do a little bit generally with remote coaching, I won't ever tell the student to do it one way. I'll normally give them like 3. So with Mia, one of the things that we've been trying to do a little bit better job of recently is when she does her backswing, she moves her left shoulder down so fast, her head dips. So when you look from behind, it's going really down and forward. So what I've told her is, I've basically told her this is the general movement that we want. As you go back, the shoulder's going to turn a bit more level for her. And I might tell someone who comes to me tomorrow a different thing, but for her, it's more level.
Mm.
And then I told her we're going to do a sequence of 3. So you're going to do one where it feels a little bit different. Then you're going to do one where it feels, and normally I just use numbers. So I'll say like a 2 out of 10. It's not too invasive. The second one's going to feel like it turns about a 5 out of 10. And the second one's going to feel like it turns almost level or flat after the takeaway. So I'm explaining her when to do it. So from here, now is when you feel it. And then she just sends me all 3, and I can go, okay, this is about where we want it. And I'll say, we're going to practice a little bit at a 5 to 7 feeling for the next few days. And I'll just monitor that. And then when I feel like it's where it's a bit more optimal, I'll tell her, now we're just going to, now we're in maintenance mode. We don't need to feel that 5 anymore or 7.
Mm.
And that has been one way that you can kind of get the message across, be it remote coaching or otherwise. So you start to put, as you said, a little bit more awareness back into the student. And it also kind of gives them a sense of what would be too much or too little versus just trying to find, let's say, an exact position.
Mm. Has it helped your communication on the live tee over the internet?
A lot. Yeah, great. That's it's hard for me to explain how much it's actually helped.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
great.
It's really changed. It's really helped, actually, I would say. I would say I'm now going a lot slower on the lesson tee than what I would have before. And I think I'm being a lot more thoughtful and explaining things when I'm trying to get a certain message across more than before. I'm a lot less about, let's just start hitting balls, and a lot more thoughtful about, okay, let's work on this a little bit. Let's try and create a feeling. Let's understand it a little bit more. And then kind of let the student maybe, feed them a few balls. But yeah, I'm not in a rush to get them hitting straight away all the time. Certain situations, yes, of course, we want to hit the ball. We need to see things. But, if we're kind of working through something, I wouldn't say I'm in a rush to get them to hit shots straight away.
Yeah, I've observed you a couple of hours while I've been over there. And one thing I've noticed with yourself and any good coach I've seen is the efficiency in which you speak and the calmness of which you go about your golf lesson. And when you speak, you can tell the student's engaged and it's very, very to the point and succinct, and it's not rushed at all. And I think that's a really, it seems to be all the elite golf coaches that I've seen and then I've heard from have the same sort of thing when they're in the practice tee.
Right.
With their students.
Yeah. I guess that maybe is just a bit of an experience thing. I think as you get more experience as a coach, you get very clear on what you see and how you feel like you could help the student in, I don't like to use the word help them fast as if like you want to change everything, but maybe as you said, like just giving that the right amount of information very specific to what they need. Whereas, I would say as a young coach starting out, you kind of see what you want to work on with the student. You can see that there's certain thing going on, but sometimes you kind of go kind of the long way to get there, or you might quite hit on that point the first time. It takes you a few goes. It takes you 5 to 10 lessons before you actually really nail it. Whereas as you get further along, it just takes you 5 minutes. And I'm not saying 5 minutes to make a change, but 5 minutes to kind of get the message across and for the student to be kind of clear on that message. There's a lot less experimenting, and you hit the point a little bit faster. Now you could still experiment with how to create the change, but I wouldn't say you're experimenting with the information that you're giving them. I think that becomes a lot clearer. and succinct,
Absolutely.
as you mentioned.
And you back it in. You don't after a couple of, if it's not working, you don't go, oh, no, let's do something else. So that's another thing I've learned, in my 10 years of coaching. Early days, I'd be like, oh my God, this person's not getting it. And you'd be just
Yeah,
like changing everything. Next week, let's
yeah,
try this, let's do that. And I didn't
yeah,
back in what I wanted to do. So even if it's not technically correct, I think if you're
yeah.
able to back yourself in and come across as, yep, this is what we're doing, this is going to work, your student will come along for the ride. There's not just one way to do things, as you know.
I agree. Yeah,
But if the coach is succinct and positive and backs himself in or her in, the
yeah,
student will feel that vibe and come along with the ride.
yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was like 100% on board with what you were saying there. You definitely need to coach at a high level. You need to have confidence in what you're doing, and I would also say you need to have a good plan of when the student's in front of you. And as soon as you start to give information, you need to be very clear sort of in what you're saying, because the student will pick up on that, and you need to kind of follow through as well. And from what I've seen with really good coaches that are certainly making, changes, or they're working through a student in different phases, I almost get a sense that they know what's coming before they've done it. So they kind of know already what's going to happen. Now, that could even be, with a conversation around mindset. They kind of know what the students, what they're certainly getting information from the student, but they know what's going to happen as far as how it's going to help the student, and they almost know the reaction of the student before they get it. So, for example, a student that might say to me, I was leading a tournament coming down the stretch, or even something like a different example. So one of my students, she says, I struggled the other day. I made 4 straight birdies. She's a good college player, and everything like crumbled after that. And I can't, I'm struggling to go low, and I feel that in that situation, I'm not handling it very well. So they're obviously looking at it in a certain light. And as a coach, we need to go, well, hey, how many times have you had 4 birdies in a row before? Do you know that, being able to get 4 birdies in a row, it's going to be the pathway to shooting a 64-3-2. So the take that we would give it as a coach, we just put a different perspective on it. We come from this side and we say, this is actually a good thing. Good to be out of your comfort zone. When you're out of your comfort zone, you learn to develop, new thoughts and feelings that when you're in that situation again, you're able to better handle it. So we look at it from a completely different light. And we know that information, when we feed it to them, is going to fuel, a different response in their brain the next time that they're in that situation. And we could go deeper into that. Just like, when we look at a certain setup position, and let's say it's an extreme slice setup position. So ball's forward, grips weak, hands to the back. Ball's only going to slice from there. So we know that when we tell the student, this is a good setup for a slice, if we want to neutralize that or even go into a draw, we would have the grip a little bit more rotated or the face more closed. We'd have the hands more forward, and we have the ball more centered. So we can say that because we know that when we do it, it's going to now neutralize the path. So I think good coaches have a mindset. They understand what's going on. They're able to relay that back to the student in a very clear way. And then when the student goes and does that, they get the result that the coach said or that they said. So there's kind of like this nice little cycle of competency, how they listen, they see the ball, they see the situation. They're able to give constructive feedback in a manner that the student can understand. They're able to deliver that feedback verbally, technically, video, and then the student gets a response straight away. They're able to use that information. Oh, the ball did this all of a sudden, or I'm 3 under again. Okay, let's settle down here and understand that this is normal. It's normal that I'm going to be a little bit out of my comfort zone. I'm going to use the breathing technique that coach said. I'm going to get in my head and have some, let's say, positive self-talk. I'm not going to crap myself here, and I'm going to stay focused on my routine, keep playing my shots, and trust my process. Start to have more faith and belief in themselves. I think when you can do that, all of a sudden, knowing what's going to happen before the student does gives them a lot of confidence.
And
your form we're looking at.
Yeah, you talked about NLP before. Yeah, the understanding of how the human learns, the motivation part of being a coach. It's very, very important along with the technical side. So you really well explained that as a good coach should have all those areas. Do you have a fingerprint or a system, not for the actual swing, we've talked about that, but in terms of your elite players, developing them to become the pros and the successful tour pros they want to be? Do you have a system in your mind to sort of get them there now? Have you developed that or written that down, or how do you go about that? Or is it just so individual for you?
It's definitely individual. Yeah. And it's a combination of too many things, obviously, maybe to list today. Because, you can get someone like Kieran Pratt. We go back to Kieran. Literally, I don't have to talk about the mental side to him. He's a bulldog. In his case, it's really just, okay, we've got to get his technique in order. We've got to make sure that you get his ass into gear, make sure he's not being lazy, whip him a few times and just let him run. He'll do the rest. He knows how to win. And then you look at, say, a Stacey, for example, where you have to feed every element of that beast. Technically, she was very poor. Mentally, she needs some building up. When she's in situations on the golf course, she breaks down. So you need to let her understand this is okay. It's natural. We learn, we build, we grow. Kieran didn't break down. He played with Tiger Woods and outscored him. You don't have to teach him how to play. He's got that in him. So I think it is highly individual. Some students, it is more of that, you need to dive into the mentality. I work with just probably the most talented golfer I've ever worked with, an Indian girl named Aditi years ago. I didn't have to dive into the mental side. She was as strong as an ox. She was so dogged. So for her, it was just developing more of her short game skills and her technical skills and her practice habits. She had poor practice habits, how she structured her practice. So in her case, it was very, very different. All three were different. And those were probably the three students that I've worked with from a younger age. I've worked with pros at a high level than that, sure, but that have had success where I've had the most influence. And all three were completely different styles. So to answer your question, it's all different. It gives you a little bit of a taste of some of the differences. And I think, if you go into a lot of Cameron McCormick's stuff, you listen to his Earn Your Edge stuff, it's different players bring different things to the table. And I think that's what makes individual coaching so interesting. We're not all telling them the same thing. Some of it is more evaluation of stats and mental side. Some of it's more technical because they can't hit that shot. They don't know they haven't got that technical proficiency. So I think that's what makes it very interesting.
Yeah. Just to finish, that's awesome, Steve. Now, I want to talk about the preparation, because what I've spoken to a lot of tour players, ex-tour players, and they keep talking about their best weeks are when they're prepared the most. So they talk about the mental preparation. They talk about knowing the shots they need to hit. So how do you prepare your elite players? Like, what is it that you need to do to prepare your players to play and for them to be successful in any given week?
So I'll start off and say, without a doubt, that the game and the physical mental preparation of players it's really on a different level than what it used to be. I think golfers and those sorts of players are much more aware of the things that they need to be doing. We've always heard of that word, like periodization and, preparing for specific weeks. Some of the things I like to do would be around analyzing that golf course. If we've got the opportunity to do so, they might have played that course the previous year, looking at specific shots that they may need to play that week. Is it a particularly narrow golf course? and do they need a second, third, or fourth backup drive? You know, do they need to learn how to hit their driver a little flatter because it's windy and narrow? Do they need to be able to hit a 3-wood off the deck that comes out a little bit more narrow, or a long iron? So things like that I'd be looking at. Bryson is just bombing all these things over bunkers. You know, maybe his thought is, well, if I can just hit it 30 yards longer, I don't need to hit an iron off some of these holes through a narrow gap. I can just bomb it over. So maybe that's his thought of preparation. But I would say what I'm looking to do is trying to map out what shots they might need that week. We know at Augusta it's more draws, and Tiger's already practicing draws all the way back in, you know, November when he's playing other courses. It could be the fact that the green speeds are going to be 12 the next week at the US Open. So we're not going to go and play it. I'm not going to practice at my home club, which have got 9s. I need to go and practice to that club that's, you know, a few kilometers away because their speeds are 11 and I need to get my feel in. So those are some of the things that I like to do. Going a little deeper, it would be just understanding shot pattern, the player's dispersion coming into that week. What sort of shapes are they hitting, and how is that going to work with specific like pin locations? So I think, but that would be more generic, and I think that can be constructed no matter what course you're playing. And maybe even going another level deeper than that, you know, we might be getting more into competitive type practice with players, spending more time on golf course, stressing them a little bit more in competitive mode. Obviously there's hundreds of drills and ways that they can practice in that respect.
Yeah, that brings me on to the unconscious competence part. And that's what, you know, we talk about with Mia going from, you know, she's got a nice foundation now. You've built a beautiful foundation. But now to make that unconscious competence where when she goes on the golf course, she has to do it one time, or you're playing, you're trying to get your card at Q school, there's pressure. So how do you develop your players, you know, to have that competence that's unconscious when there's pressure and your mind tries to get in the way?
So a couple of different threads to pull on there. I think the second one being, you know, looking at going to a Q school and trying to figure that out. Some of it's experience for sure. You know, some players are just going to not know how to handle it the first or second time. So sometimes just going back, like Stacey missed Q school the first time by 1 or 2 shots. She scored a 10 in the third round on one of the holes after hitting the pin and bouncing back in the water and then dumping her next one in there. And she missed by like 1 shot. And the following year she came second. Aditi that I work with won Q school as a 17-year-old with a record of 23 under par. Very different mindsets. So, you know, some of it you could say is experience. And again, some of it's mindset, kind of going back to what I said before. Some of it, you know, is perspective, you know, having conversation around the fact that there's, let's say 150 players trying to get 20 cards. The reality is more than half of those are already out because of their mindset. So if you can get your players to understand how to get into a frame of mind that they're not really competing against 144, there's probably 30 girls realistically that are going to get those 20 spots or 40. So, but not everyone needs to have that conversation, if that makes sense. So that would be one thing. With regards to Mia, for me, I really have to get her to understand about her expectation levels going from what we've been doing. And she's on social media and people are giving her a razz about getting on the golf course and hitting off grass. If she gets too caught up in that, she'll get cooked. So it's my job to kind of keep bringing her down a few notches and say, let's firstly spend a bit more time at the range off grass. Let's then experience hitting out of rough. And she can do this on the golf course as well. But I prefer her to do it with her boyfriend in a safe environment first. Let's start to talk about some different lies, like how do we adjust off those different lies? Because first thing I'd say, if she's not competent to hit it off grass or a mat, let's say off grass, off a flat lie, 7 out of 10 times, all that happens on the golf course is those averages start to get less and less. You know, it's going to go to 40%, 30%, then we get a hanging lie. So I do think for a beginner, there's a real stage in getting them ready. Now, you could throw anyone in the deep end and they can, they know how to, they can hold themselves. They're not going to drown, but they have to be prepared for some change. It's not going to be the same. So part of my job, even with Amia, is to get her to understand there's going to be some, shaky grounds there. It's not going to be smooth sailing. She has to be prepared for 20, 30, 50 most likely, which is 10 to 20% of what she's doing on a mat will translate to the golf course. 30% is going to be somewhere in between, and 50% is going to be carnage. Now,
yeah.
I don't mind doing that, because if it's better than that, she'll feel better about herself. But if it is that, which is probably about the reality, she'll be like, oh, okay, that's pretty much what coach says. She'll still ask me why, but at least I can map it out for her, and in her brain she'll be like, okay, well, I know, internally she'll feel like she should do a lot better. But if I've said that to her, she's not going to fall too hard. She'll just fall to a point and go, okay, well, that's pretty much what Stephen said. I'll get on with it, sort of thing. And then I'll just start to, like I said to her, you need to be able to do 7, 8, 9 times out of 10 off a mat or grass clean. Then we could start to understand those percentages when you get to the golf course. Then we can slowly start to shift those percentages in your favor on the golf course.
Yeah, I think that's a cool thing you say. Managing expectations is huge, definitely. Is there anything? Experience is also another thing. Like you said, once you go through the pressure, once you go through the understanding of a different environment, there's nothing better than that if you can learn from it. But is there anything in training that you could do? Is there anything particular you can try and get yourself into that mindset of being on the course? You've got one chance only. Is there drills you give in terms of that for a beginner or a player to put themselves in the position where it's the last hole, you got to make birdie to make the cut or whatever it is. Do you go through scenarios like that on course?
So in Mia's case, what I would do with her when she goes to a grass range, I would get her to, let's say, do a series of 10 shots with one club. And every time she hit a shot, she had to completely switch her angle and switch where she's hitting from. Now, it doesn't have to be, a big change, but she might hit one ball to the left side of the fairway and just aim at a tree. Then she might move 3 paces to the left with one other ball and aim down the middle of the fairway to, a 100. Then she might go back to where she was or on the opposite side and hit to the right side. So constantly changing target, changing angle, changing position is the closest thing we could probably do to the golf course, on top of, starting to change lie. But I still think that would be, another stage. When you can do what I've just explained reasonably solidly and move around, then the golf course experience is going to be a little bit easier. And from a playing standpoint, I would just say it's tough. I don't think it matters how much money you have on the line and how many guys you play with in like a competitive environment where, you've got a one-shot lead and you've all put in 100 or you've all put in 500 and there's a little bit, and the juices are flowing. I don't still think you can replicate what it would feel like to make par to get your cut on the Asian Tour or the US Tour. I really don't think. I think that's still an experience thing. Yeah. There's coping mechanisms for sure, how someone might talk to themselves, but I think all of that is done through the course of being in those situations.
Yeah, very cool.
Ultimately. And different people are going to handle it in different ways. I think that's fair to say, based on a lot of things.
Yeah, cool, mate. Well, 2 questions to finish. One is, if you're a golf coach coming up, young trainee, and you're listening to this, what advice have you got from a young coach point of view to make a successful golf coaching career over a decade or so, 20 years, 30 years?
Without a doubt, you have to have a passion for teaching. So assuming we've got a super passionate coach, I would say literally learn everything you can learn within your chosen field, even stuff that you think is not right, even stuff that you maybe, it's publicly, someone says, oh, don't do what Mike Bender does. That's wrong. Or, You know, don't do what Andy Plummer teaches, or don't do what George Gankus does. Learn what everyone does, and you'll eventually like come up with, you know, what works for you. I'd say don't be single-minded, be like very open-minded. And I would say that's for all areas of the game. If you want to be a coach, you need to have some skills in all areas. I don't think you need to be an expert in all areas, but you need to understand if the body's not working correctly, okay, maybe I can't help them out because I'm, you know, I haven't studied anatomy for my life, but I know that, you know, this arm can't move very well. Is it an issue? Does he need to go and see a physio or whatever in order to get it to move effectively, or do we work around it? If you can't have a thoughtful conversation around their mindset in certain situations, you're not going to be going to be able to offer them the most value. So sure, they might need to go and see someone at a higher level that can help them with their routines and whatever. But I think having a basic understanding of a lot of things is important. Otherwise, you're going to be a bit of a one-trick pony, which can still work. I mean, there's great swing coaches out there, but I'd say be very open-minded and be very passionate and learn as much as you can for the first 10 years. Do not be interested in making money. There you go.
Yeah, nice. Great
Don't try
advice.
and make money in your first 10 years.
Great advice. Absolutely. Great advice. Get out there on the teaching deck and just do the lessons and create your own fingerprint. Yeah. And back it in.
100%.
Back it in. And yeah, we talked about Mike Bender. I mean, yeah, we could look at that. He's so into it, isn't he? And he's got conviction in what he's doing.
Huge amount. Yeah.
And that is just as important, isn't it?
I think it's the most important thing. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you teach. It's, you know, it's how you teach and it's how you say it, because ultimately the student's going to draw confidence in how you deliver the message. And Mike's obviously a brilliant coach. He's had a laundry list of tour players that you or I would never have. You know, it's just the reality. So whatever he's saying, it's working for him and his students. And I think there's, you know, it doesn't matter what really you're saying, as long as you're getting the results. That's the most important thing. Everyone's going to have differing opinions. You know, we're not changing the world.
Yeah, for sure.
But we're just trying to keep, you know, get our students better and get them to enjoy the game at the highest level that they can possibly get to.
Yeah, great. And the last one was, if I'm looking for a golf coach, I'm out there, I'm either a beginner, I want to try the game, or I want to take my golf to the next level. What do you look for in a coach? I
would say you're definitely looking for a coach that fits the current level that you're playing at, which again can be somewhat subjective. But if you're looking, for example, for coaches online or maybe in your area, I think you want to have an understanding of, are they currently coaching a lot of beginners? Have they had success? You know, an elite player, are they working with current elite players? You know, Jay Kelly at the moment, who's in England, he's got a tour school project he's doing. He's got 25 or 30 really elite players. So his focus is he wants to create players that can play on the Q school. He's very focused. So, you know, if golfers elite players are looking for someone in his area, they're going to be drawn to him. Bernie, that coaches in Singapore, works with juniors, all under 10. That's where you're going to go. You don't go to me. So I'd say do your research on who are you right now, like what level are you at, and which coaches had results in that space. It can be other things like price points and whatnot. I kind of get that. But you know, if you can come up with a list of 2 or 3 coaches that you've heard speak, you know, maybe it's on YouTube, maybe it's on Instagram, maybe it's on their website, and you know, you like their message and they've had some proven results, I think that's where marketing and social media is important. If you can put live lessons of how you've improved the student, whether that's Instagram, whether that's YouTube or whatever, and students can watch that, now they can make a very informed decision versus just some nice text that might be on your website. I just think that's where everything's going. It's very visual. You need to be putting yourself out there to some extent, whether that is written or it's video or it's, you know, you're able to project your message out there. So I think the student needs to do their homework.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, good advice, mate. And I want to thank you for your time. I've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed our chat, and I'm sure people at home have too. If they want to hook up with you, either online or locally in KL, tell us where to find you.
Yeah, so my website is sggc.com.au. I probably do use Instagram the most, SG Golf Coaching. So yeah, those are probably the two main sources. And I do teach quite a bit in KL and when I'm traveling across Southeast Asia, KL, Malaysia.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I recommend that people look you up, even if it's just your Instagram, give you a follow. Great information.
Cheers,
so good luck to you, mate. As I said, I'm glad you're out of lockdown now and back out on the tee, and look forward to catch up at some point.
Awesome, buddy. Hopefully we can travel soon and catch up.
Yeah, sounds like a plan, mate.